system.
Very welcome to this conversation, Mr. Chibedi. Together with Mr. Chibedi is Mr. Tuyatemba James. He's the manager for examinations management from the Uganda National Examinations Board, UNEB. You're very welcome, Mr. Tuyatemba.
Thank you, Mr. Jagenda. I'm glad to be here, hosted by UBC Television, and I hope we shall have a nice conversation this afternoon.
You're very welcome today. And of course, finally, in studios is Mr. Busobozi Godfrey. He's the executive director of an organization or association called KUPSTA, which is the Coalition for Uganda Private Schools Teachers Association, KUPSTA. In short, you're very welcome, Mr. Busobozi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jagenda, and good afternoon, viewers out there. You're most welcome to this show where we're going to exchange ideas to do with education in Uganda.
Let me start with you because you're from the private sector, Mr. Busobozi.
Yes.
What are your feelings, first and foremost, about the policy itself? And were you as a private teachers or were you as private practitioners in education involved in the making of the policy? Or it is a government policy that you have no choice but to follow, accept, and just go with?
Thank you, Mr. Jagenda. To answer you straight, yes. As a Coalition of Uganda Private School Teachers...
I thought you were going to say yes and no.
No.
It's a yes. Very good.
As Coalition of Uganda Private School Teachers, we were involved from day one. Because from the recommendations that came out of the TISA report, we were involved in the development of the national teacher policy from the start up to the end, and until today when we are now doing the dissemination. Yes, for the private practitioners, when things come, because they are initiated by the public sector, it's government initiation. So by the time they come to us in the private sector, in most cases, it comes later. Because the priority is given to government. Now from government, then it trickles down and then it goes to the private sector. Actually, one of the reasons why KUPSTA was founded, it was majorly to see to it that the government practices resonate well with what happens within the private sector. If you are very keen, you will realize that the Ministry of Education and Sports has a whole department of private school teachers, or private schools actually, not private school teachers, but the private schools department. And it is that department that we work closely, hand in hand with, to see to it that whatever takes place in government should exactly happen within the private sector. This we have been doing for some time now, and so far so good. And we are also continuing amidst the challenges to disseminate the national teacher policy. We are trying our level best because we partnered with the ministry. We want to see to it that at least everybody gets to know of. If somebody doesn't get to know of, at least gets to hear about the national teacher policy, such that over time we cover the whole country.
Thank you very much, and welcome again. Let me come to Mr. Chibedi Nkutia from the Ministry of Education to talk about this now. When you look into policy, it has got quite a number of things in there. You talk about the Teacher Institute, you talk about the National Teacher Council, you talk about quite a number of things in there. Address us on the council itself, what's intended to do, what's going to do, and the possible successes that it may or it might achieve in as far as implementing the policy is concerned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jagenda. The Teacher Council is going to be formed so that it operates like the other councils that regulate other professions. And that is the main work, that this council will be there to regulate the teaching profession as we professionalize our teachers in the country. It will be in charge of, for example, ensuring that the standards that have been established within this or are talked about by this policy are enforced within the teaching fraternity. It will be working closely with the UNITE, Uganda National Teacher Institute for Education, to ensure that the programs that are developed in training the teachers follow the principles that have been established within the policy. It will also be in charge of ensuring that teachers register every 2 years. Currently, our teachers have been registered. Once you register forever as a profession until either you die or you retire, or something like that. But the policy is now saying, no, we must do the way other respected professions do. So every 2 years, teachers will be required to register again after meeting certain conditions that will be set by the Teacher Council. The Teacher Council will also be in charge of reviewing the remunerations and the salaries and wages, so that they advise government on how to make sure that we have motivated teachers in the country. They will be reviewing the scheme of service, for example, because in the TISA report that my colleague talked about, it was a very, very critical issue from teachers. Many of them are not well motivated. Some of them have left the teaching profession because of that. So this Teacher Council will be in charge of ensuring that our teachers are well incentivized, they are well motivated, and so on and so forth. The council will also be in charge of discipline, the discipline of our teachers. It is an issue these days. You read in the media, and it is very rare that in a week you read in the media there is no an indisciplined teacher being reported upon. So once this council will be in charge of that teachers who are not really conforming to the teaching professions, the teachers' code of conduct or performance, the council will be able to deal with them, either through counseling them, through even to the extent of removing them from the teacher role, so that they leave the profession and we leave those who are there to do the right thing. The council will also be responsible for advising government on the new trends in the teaching profession, so that they are either embedded in the training or in the policies that will come later. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tuyatemba, you are from the Uganda National Examinations Board. Yes, and I just want to know how you come in, because when you look into the policy here that the gentleman here talking about, is you notice that there is also a plan of a government instituting what they call the Uganda National Institute for Teacher Education. Now, this will do what I think UNEB is actually doing. I just want to know, how does now UNEB again come into the implementation and the discussion or conversation of the national teacher policy?
Yeah, when you look at the arrangement in our system, we have a partnership where you have, for example, the Ministry of Education agencies, and UNEB is one of them.
Of the agencies.
You'll find that, yes, National Curriculum Development Center is in charge of curriculum development. They actually bring out what is to be taught and the pedagogical aspects, the aspects of how it should be taught. Then the teacher is also a very important cog in that wheel of the tripartite partnership, if I may call it that way, such that the teacher now teaches what has been prescribed by National Curriculum Development Center, NCDC. Then for us as UNEB, we come in to complete the picture, because we want to assess whether the intended curriculum is what actually has been taught by the teachers. And then as an examining body, it all begins with us, because we provide the raw material for teacher education. It is the learner that we train right from nursery up to whatever level they want to reach, that this learner ultimately may be taken up to become a teacher. And therefore, we start the whole standard setting process. At primary 7, we give a primary living examination qualification, where at the end of it all, people can actually go there to do the PTC arrangement, which we are phasing out with time. But then if they proceed to all, that is after O level, they can proceed to PTCs to get certificates. But then when they proceed to A level, they can actually either go for a diploma course or a degree course in teaching.
At NTCs?
Now yes, at
from NTCs now
yes,
to NTCs?
Yes,
or
which
to
is
university?
also going to be phased out.
Okay.
But then it's after the teacher has graduated that qualifications framework will now look entirely at the teacher who has been trained. But for us as UNEB, our work and that of National Teacher Qualification Framework are not antagonistic, but rather they are complementary. Because we start the process, and even as they develop the teacher, we are with them, even to do what we call continuous professional development. Because assessment is a specialized field, And it is part and parcel of any meaningful teaching and learning experience. And therefore, we are in harmony. We shall move together to bring out the teacher that we need. Not antagonistic, but rather complementary efforts.
These allude to what they call the TISA report, the TISSA report that was conducted, which of course gives birth to the National Teacher Policy. Are you mentioned anywhere in the TISA report that there were loopholes here in a way that you need to come in? Have you sensed anything that really needs the involvement of the Uganda National Examinations Board? Yeah,
Uganda National Examinations Board does not only bring out the qualification that these people need. We also conduct research, which research feeds into the TISA aspects. If you look at the TISA document, a lot of what is quoted is actually from NAPE, National Assessment of Progress in Education. In those reports, we bring out the school or education situation generally. What is the quality of the teacher that we have? What are the competencies that are being churned out through the learning? What are the areas of difficulty? What are the other exogenous factors that interfere with the teaching and learning process? All those and any other data on dropout rates, completion rates, the gender balance issues, rural-urban imbalances, all those research results and reports are being actually generated by UNEB to inform policy, so that as we bring out this kind of teacher policy, it is based on informed decisions that are backed up by research. So we are part and parcel of it.
From your name now, did you look at us as being on the right trajectory with the National Teacher Policy, the way we want it, and if by the grace of God it actually achieves its objectives? Do you look at us as being on the right trajectory as a country and as far as education is concerned?
Yeah, as a country, I think the issues being raised are very pertinent, and we are right on the trajectory. We only have to bite what we can chew as a country, because definitely has resource implications, human resource implications, economic resource implications, and any other. So that when we are going to implement this, we cannot implement it in a vacuum. And even when we are going to implement it, we look at our unique conditions as a country, Uganda, so that it's not a question of copy and paste. The issues which are being brought about, how to amplify professionalism, how to bring about issues of standardization, how to bring about issues of innovation on the part of the teacher, how to do teacher motivation. All these are pertinent issues, but we have to look at them in the context of Uganda's level of development.
Okay. Mr. Msobozi,
Yes.
there is a challenge now with private teaching or private school ownership, because these are predominantly business-oriented persons, even when they are in this field. Now, you'll notice that many of the people who actually own schools have not trained as teachers, or they are not educationists, or whatever the case may be. They only came into business to see what that happens. Now, you talked about the TIMIS, which is one of the things that you're trying to, which government is trying to implement. I want to see how private sector and private teachers specifically, or maybe those who are subscribed to KUPSTA, how they receive and how they are embracing or getting involved into the policy that is being talked about.
Thank you, Mr. Jagenda. You see, we are talking about the National Teacher Policy. And when we talk of a policy, it's a policy of government. And here specifically, the emphasis is on the teacher. Now, we need to define who a teacher is. And for this particular aspect, we are looking at a trained, qualified teacher who is a professional. Ideally, the NTP, or the National Teacher Policy, is intended to bring back professionalism in the teaching profession. Because over time, the teaching profession has been infiltrated by non-teachers. And whoever is there calls himself or herself a teacher, regardless whether he or she subscribes to the teaching profession. Now, when it comes to the question which you put across, yes, you are aware as a country, you are free to start up a business anywhere, anytime you want.
Any business?
Any business, as long as it is within the legal means. Now, education was liberalized. So we are running education as a private entity, 100% private nothing to do with government. But remember, the policies are generated by the government. So what does that one mean? Whereas you are operating a private school, you must be able to conform with what the government puts in place. And we have realized over time, the education system has challenges. And because of the challenges they are in, it affects everybody. Because each one of us goes through the hands of the teacher. Now, how do we solve this puzzle? Then the NTP went and addressed the person. That person is the teacher. How do we have that teacher to act or to be a professional, despite the fact that he or she is in the private sector, such that whatever is being done is done professionally? Now, the National Teacher Policy, it has, of course, challenges on implementation, and that's why we are now on a national broadcaster, UBC, so that we can be able to reach out to the wider community out there to do with the sensitization first, so that we know there is the National Teacher Policy. Now, the implementation bit of this policy has already started. We have so far moved, 2 years have been covered, but now the ingredients of it, how are we having it effected within the private sector? Now, that is administrative. I will not delve so much into it. My role here is basically to call upon the teachers who are teaching in the private schools to be aware of the ingredients that are embedded within the National Teacher Policy. And out of the very many, you include the registration bit when you talk about TIMIS, the Teacher Management Information System. So for you to be a teacher, to be a professional teacher, you have to be on the National Register of Teachers. And the development of the National Register for Teachers is being done through TIMIS, which is managed by the Ministry of Education and Sports. So please, if you are teaching in the private school, go and register. Log on the website. You go to TIMIS website. You will follow the prompts and register and be given a certificate. As we go over time, we shall discuss these details. What do you do and what happens in the processes? And then secondly, there is the other aspect, if you can remember the last talk show we had here. There is the issue of training and upgrading. Because the teachers today, the least qualified is a certificate holder. Now we are saying the minimum qualification within the National Teacher Policy is a degree holder. So how many of our teachers within the private schools do hold degrees? And I'm calling upon those ones who do not hold those degrees to do so. Let them upgrade and go through the ranks from level 1 to the next level until they get a bachelor's degree. Because you will remember, Mr. Jagenda, in history, the way how teachers became to be in Uganda. You know, teaching as a profession was developed here by the missionaries. And the people who became teachers were selected by these missionaries to fulfill their purpose at the time. Some included interpretation, others included guidance. Then over time, training colleges were introduced. Then we got licensed teachers. So there were people who were taken to be licensed teachers. There was the history of the vernacular teachers, if you can remember these things.
Vernacular teachers, yes, we had that time.
And then we had the grade 2 teachers. Now, all these have been phased out. The vernacular teachers are no more. The licensed teachers are no more. The grade 2s are no more. Now we have the commonly known as grade 3s, then grade 5s, and then graduate teachers. So now we are saying, with this new policy, we are now going for the National Teacher Policy. However, it is not going to come, boom, single day. 5? Sorry?
Did you say grade 5?
Yes, grade 5, which is the diploma level. Now, this graduate is not going to come in a single...
So the list now is grade 3
yes,
for the certificate?
It's now grade 3. That's why you have grade 3, grade 5, and then graduate. Now, we now want a graduate, which is going to be the bare minimum. So for you to qualify to be called a teacher, you will need to be a graduate teacher. Now, we are calling upon our colleagues within the private sector and the proprietors of schools, so that they are in a position to put up systems on how these teachers can be able to upgrade and then they're in position to catch up with the policy. Otherwise, they will be left out. And the only way to change is to accept change.
According to Mr. Valentine Owori, who I think is one of your persons handling the TMIS, I asked him here, and he gave me some statistics which I don't remember offhand of the number of people who have actually already enrolled with the TMIS. Let me hear from you. How many from the private sector have actually gotten onto TMIS as it is now? And they want to know how many private teachers we have in this country.
Now, I will not give you the
exact numbers.
The exact number statistics offhand, but even then, you see, you have to understand these things in context. The registration of the teachers on the TMIS register is not for only practicing teachers. It is all teachers. If Mr. Jagenda, you chose to become a journalist, but you hold the teaching qualifications, please go and register. Even if you are retired, but you hold the teacher's qualifications, please go and register. So I will not delve so much into that statistics which we have, because the situation which I'm talking about is to do with the practice, because we want to see how many teachers do we have in a country. Because you see, Mr. Jagenda, for purposes of planning, if you interact with the NPA, we need to know the human resource for our country. How many teachers do we have trained in this country? Now, take for example, if you have got 500,000 trained teachers,
500,000 of them in the country.
500,000 of them in the country, where are they? Are they teaching? Then you are able to do a follow-up. Then you do a needs assessment, and you are able to fill in the gaps. So that these universities and the teacher training institutions should be able to know that within a particular year, now that we have got this number of manpower, which is in the field, so we know this number. Then at the planning level, you'll be able to know that now we have trained enough teachers for this qualification, for this level, for this sector. So we now need to put emphasis at this level. And that's how we shall build the country. Okay.
Mr. Nkutu, you head the department, or in Department of Teacher Training Education, project coordination from the Ministry of Education and Sports. Now, let's talk about the teacher training itself, because we now see a policy that is here, and the policy is now being implemented, I'm sure, that lots of things are continuing to happen. But there's also the old system that we've been going through. The PTCs, like Mr. Tema here talked about. We have the NTCs, we have those now in universities, and they are doing bachelors of education in a way. How do they now get assimilated into this policy? For example, I'm only mindful of a person who may be listening to us, and he or she is in school doing their grade 3 certificate, and they've had this gentleman here, Mr. Sobozi, say you need a bachelor's as a bare minimum, and they're asking now, what happens? Do I stop this? Then either go back to school, see how to again get to university? What happens in that regard for these already in PTCs, NTCs, and we talk about bachelor's degrees?
Yeah, the policy takes care of that very well. For those who are training as grade 3s, please continue with your course. When you finish, go for the diploma, and you are given 10 years within which to become a graduate. Our diplomas are a minimum of 2 years. The degrees are a minimum of 3 years. So a serious candidate should be ordinarily.
According to the policy, I think it is more than 3 years.
Yeah, ordinarily.
It now goes to, I think, 4 years and another year.
So the policy gives 10 years for somebody to become a degree holder.
To transform from one to
from one level to another. It is the same thing with those who are doing grade 5 or diploma. After you have qualified, from the time you qualify, you'll be given 10 years within which to upgrade and become a graduate teacher. For those who are already in university doing their bachelors, you are well and good. They should continue. What is likely to change a bit, maybe for the universities, is that the formation of Uganda National Teacher Institute will now work closely with the body that is in charge of higher education, that programs that relate to education will be regulated. That although universities are independent, but there must be some harmony, so that a teacher who trains from University A has a lot of similarities with the teacher who trains from University see. That is what the policy comes in to do. So for those who are training at whatever level you are, please, you don't need to get discouraged. The policy caters for you, and it gives you 10 years within to do that. There are also those, like Mr. Obosobo said, who are grade 3 teachers, or who are diploma teachers. They are already employed, or even if you are not yet employed, the opportunity is now there. You need to go back, study, upgrade yourself, so that when the policy is fully implemented, then you are not, you are not caught up. Those who are already in the government payroll, maybe I will begin with those ones, they need to do it even faster. Because maybe 10 years from now, as the policy says 2021, we have begun the policy. If somebody will not have graduated up to that level, then you not benefit from being a graduate. Because one of the reasons why this policy comes in like that is one of the standards is to make sure that you begin from a uniform pay. Even private institutions will be compelled by government to give a salary that befits a graduate teacher. So that is the basis of that.
Away from UNITE, being able to manage and design the curriculum, will it also have a central examinations body? For example, when we talk about primary secondary education, is we know that Mr. Tuliate Bahia from Uganda National Examinations Board will set for us exams at primary level, at secondary level, to qualify us at those levels. Will UNITE do the same? Because the practice today is every individual university sets its own examinations. There is no central examinations body for universities. In every university that you go to, you sit your own exams, then you meet somewhere in practice or whatever that means. So will UNITE also, or does the policy also address something of that nature, that there will be, like we see there is UBTEB, there is that for the nurses and all these things. Is there anything like that?
No. No and yes. Let me begin with the no. The no is for the universities, because universities are autonomous. They develop their own programs, and then they have the assessment policy and so on and so forth. But what the policy now talks of is that before these programs are approved by the National Council for Higher Education, UNITE will have a hand in it. So that it looks at the program itself, including the assessment modalities, so that they are similar to maybe what UNITE would like to see, so that we come up with a teacher that is well trained. But what is going to happen now to these other institutions that are currently training, like the national teachers colleges, they are most likely going to be campuses of UNITE. If they are campuses of UNITE, it means they will be doing the same examinations. Similarly, even the primary teachers colleges, either they will be affiliated, or they may also be campuses of UNITE, in which case they will be doing the same examination regulated by UNITE. So that is what is likely to happen. But for universities, they of course they remain autonomous, but the UNITE will give guidance on the programs that pertain to training a teacher. The other thing that UNITE will be doing, because one would ask, how about those who have qualified? And we have already, earlier on I have already the fact that National Teacher Council will be registering teachers, is to manage the continuous professional development. Mr. Obosobo, as I said, even if you are not a teacher, you are not in teaching service,
you're not practicing.
Yeah, but when it comes to registering, you must prove that you have been practicing as a teacher. Okay. Like a lawyer goes back to register, you must prove that within a year you have been in legal practice. So similarly, that's what will happen, and UNITE will be in charge of that. A teacher was already qualified. Within the 2 years, there must be value added on you that enables you to remain in the teaching profession. If you have not been able to do that, then you will be referred to go back, do some CPDs, that's continuous professional training, courses, that will be approved by UNITE before you are registered. Okay. Yeah.
We will take a break, but before we take a break, and when we return from the break, Mr. Triatem, I want you to help address me on this particular, is when you come back from the break, what's the problem that you notice that all of us go to the same university or the same teacher training institute, for example. Then we qualify, then go and practice differently. Then I go to a school which never performs well. he goes to a school which is a mediocre school, and you go to schools which are highly performing. And we train the same. We actually went to the same NTC, or we even went to the same school of education in some university. What we think causes this, that teachers trained under the same roof, under the same instruction, under the same everything, but when it comes to performance now, you notice that my chemistry students never pass. Your chemistry students are getting flying colors and all the things. So you'll help us, especially because you're coming from UNEB. We'll take a break and return. Remember, this program talks about the National Teacher Policy. It's brought to you by the Ministry of Education and Sports, and also with the support of UNESCO. We'll return shortly after the break.
The Teacher Management Information System, TMIS, is one of the innovations the Ministry of Education and Sports has rolled out to have all teachers register online. This is in line with the spirit of the National Teacher Policy to professionalize the teaching profession and the Ministry's effort to collate teacher data in a single database for better teacher management. Join us as we host officials of the Ministry of Education and Sports to discuss the Teacher Management Information System. The show is sponsored by the United Nations Education Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, under the Norwegian Teacher Initiative in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Sports.
What does it mean to be closer together? It's taking the last bus home for a surprise visit. Closer together is strangers finding a connection. It's bringing home something much more than a box. It's the warmth of home, or the beginning of something new. There's magic in sharing the things that we love, because it's those things that bring us close together.
We've cut and reduced our MTN Momo withdrawal rates. Now you can withdraw mobile money at the lowest rates. You also get MTN Century Points when you deposit, send, and withdraw MTN mobile money. Visit our Momo agents countrywide and withdraw mobile money at our reduced rates from 1st May 2021. Everywhere you go, MTN.
The Teacher Management Information System, TMIS, is one of the innovations the Ministry of Education and Sports has rolled out to have all teachers register online. This is in line with the spirit of the National Teacher Policy to professionalize the teaching profession and the Ministry's effort to collate teacher data in a single database for better teacher management. Join us as we host officials of the Ministry of Education and Sports to discuss the Teacher Management Information System. The show is sponsored by the United Nations Education Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, under the Norwegian Teacher Initiative in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Sports.
But it's the way to go. Welcome back from the break. My name is Yagada Samakola Ziksoka, and we continue with a discussion of the National Teacher Policy brought to you by the Ministry of Education and Sports with support from UNESCO. Now, with me in studios are three gentlemen. Mr. Sobozi, the Executive Director from CUPSTA, the Private Schools Coalition for Private Teachers Association. I have Mr. Tuyatemba from the National Examinations Board, and he's the Education's Manager. And I also have Mr. Nkutu, Mr. Chibedi Nkutu from the Ministry of Education and Sports. Before we took a break, Mr. Tuyatemba, I'd posed a question for you on we having the same training and having different output. What causes that?
Yes, Mr. Jagenda, I want, and the listener, I want to ensure that we understand how education is a system, and the school itself is a subsystem within the entire system. Yes. So in a system, you will find that there is an input. In this case, the teacher from the same industry or factory is the input part of it. Then we get the learner as also part of the input. And then we get the financial, the textbooks, and other resources as part of the inputs that go into a school system. Now, when they now mingle in the school, then you have the process. The process where all these inputs are interacting. The teacher is interacting with the learner. The learner is interacting with the textbook. The parent is also coming into the school to find out whether standards are being met. There are other variables that actually go on in the form of the process. And ultimately, what goes on in the school process is what is churned out as an output. And therefore, the output will take the trend reflecting the quality of the process. What do I mean here? King's College Budo is getting the cream de la cream of this country as grade 1. They have first class facilities, teachers inclusive and so on. Definitely they will churn out a very good output. Same teacher from the same college, different inputs in terms of quality, students, resources and so on, therefore giving us super quality inputs, outputs. Then you find that other people taking those who have grade 4, grade 3, but King's College Budo, Gayaza and so on have taken cream, grade 1. Definitely the output will not be the same because the resources are not homogeneous. They favor those which have taken. The only thing that I think we need to change with the time is not to take the brightest students in the schools which have the best facilities. It's the same as, for example, in the Ministry of Health. If we said that all the surgical cases should be handled by grade 4 medical facilities, and then those which are flu and cough should be managed by referral hospitals like Mulago. So I think there's a need for a shift in the policy to ensure that actually access to these facilities is not dependent mainly on performance. But then the question is, which are the best criteria will you use to make sure that people agree that you selected these people basing on a certain merit principle to join those few places in Budo, in Gayaza, in Amagunga, and so on. Now, what we need to reflect on as a country is that we need to harmonize the conditions in schools. And that's why school teachers are posted everywhere countrywide. The other issue for the ministry is to make sure that if there are textbooks, they actually are given out, all schools, and it is being done. And then we also look at the principle of saying we have a school per sub-county funded and built by the government. Those are all trying to equalize opportunities so that those imbalances are really minimized. But they definitely will not be eliminated. I also want to add that there are other variables which may relate to a learner. Even if the conditions were similar everywhere, the inputs are the same, the sources are the same, the abilities of the learner are not the same. Because we have what we call slow learners, others are learners with special needs, those who are deaf, those who are blind, those who are hard of hearing, those who are dyslexic. The quality of the learner is also a factor. And therefore, even if all the conditions are the same, the learner, there are those also who are gifted, very super, and they become indisciplined kids if you don't take care of their interests. They're also special needs learners in their own right. Okay. So the quality of the learner is also a factor. Such that because of those differences in outputs, in inputs, in terms of learner, in terms of other resources, in terms of the background, the environment in which somebody is operating. If you bring a rural child, for example, who has never seen electricity, and you bring him near a switch, the fellow will not even touch the switch. But if you bring somebody who is bred in the in the urban setting, you bring the child near the switch, the fellow will either switch on or off, because the environment in which the learner has been brought also has an impact on the experiences and the competencies of that learner. So there are many things that go on in a school. Okay. So it's not only the teacher factor, but also other exogenous factors.
I want to thank you so much, because I think you've made a very good submission onto that. I'm a sports fan, and then, in sports we normally we support different, especially these English clubs. And there's that argument of so-and-so is a very good coach, but they say take them to the other smaller teams, or they exactly. If you have a coach and you give them the best, the Ronaldos, then they'll score goals, of course. Yes. But then you go and struggle with those who are not the Ronaldo class, and we see what happens. So I think it's a very good discussion here. Mr. Busobozi, one of the things that the policy addresses is CPDs, and I think that's one of the crux of the issues in this particular policy. Mr. Nkutia talked about it and said, gone are the days where you would just go to school, graduate, qualify, and come out as a teacher, and so you are like that forever until eternity. That is no more, and we talk about now CPDs. I want you to address me from the private teacher's angle, whether CPDs are something that they will handle, manage, and it's not something that is going to throw them out of the profession to get into other businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Jagenda, and viewers outside there. CPD, continuous professional development. Simply put, you have to continuously develop as a professional. Now, these CPDs, it is their sessions of the sort. It is their lessons. You have to be taught and you score points, which make you become a better teacher. That's what the policy is addressing. Now, I'm asking you here and the viewers outside there, those who have private schools and do carry out CPDs, which earn a professional score to the teacher, how many are they? Now, that is why this policy came into being. Because what is it that we are looking out for when this policy was being developed? We want to get a teacher who is a professional teacher. You see, I have my reservations with the system which we run, especially to do with UNEB. You have heard my colleagues talk. Now, if we are all teachers, we are all professionals, and you are administering an examination, the same exam which cuts across, bearing in mind that the environment varies. Why should you score me a 0? Does it mean that I don't know anything in mathematics? That when I sit PLOE, I get a 0?
And I think that's a very good question to Mr. Tuyatemba here, because he knows that my school has actually gotten the worst to come. Your school is King's College Buddha and all the others which have taken the best. But when he's setting exams to us, they're equalized.
Now, you see, that is environmentally determined. The example which he gave of switching on and switching off. Because equally, if I also take a student from here back to a rural area and I tell him or her to milk a cow, it will also be another story altogether. So these are environmental variations. Now, that's why we are putting emphasis on this teacher, so that we can have somebody who is a professional and very competent enough. Hence these CPDs, because once the CPDs are there, because they usually identify the gaps, where is the gap, and you fill it up. And then over time you build this person until you get the super teacher, and then we shall be able to have the super products that come out of these teachers. Now, excuse me. Now, when you look at the private schools today, by and large, if you took a census, you see, they are being driven by the academic aspect. And when I talk about academics, I'm not talking about the academic sense of it, but the passing of examinations. Now, for this school to be, and I have also heard in your talk, Mr. Jagenda, for you are looking at passing these super grades. You know, once you have children passing with aggregate 4 in P7, 8 in 8 at senior 4, triple A at A level, then you know that the school is a very good school. But education is holistic. There is something more beyond these good what?
Grades.
These grades. You see, when you have good grades, they should really be good grades all through, because that means you are excelling in all aspects and in all spheres. Because I will challenge you. We have been running this system for a while now as an education system. Where do our geniuses fizzle to? Why don't we have what geniuses do? We should be having something...
In other economies, in other countries.
Yes, we should be having these extraordinary things which are being done by extraordinary students. And then we would challenge the system and say, yes, the system is up and running. Now, that's why we are saying with this policy, if we address the teacher first, then the product of this teacher will be better.
And CPD is a tall order for private schools?
Of course it is.
It is a tall order.
It's not so easy. And actually, I want Mr. Nkutu to bring it out. How will this CPD be conducted? Who conducts CPD? How do we get this CPD to be real CPD? Because you will have an in-house seminar and you will call it a CPD.
Okay.
So let Mr. Nkutu explain further on that. I don't want to delve into it.
Okay.
Let him speak it from the ministry angle.
Exactly, because it comes from the ministry. We'll talk about that. But just before I come to Mr. Nkutu, to still to you, we've talked about professionalizing the profession of teaching itself. And one of the things that it addresses, or that it is intended to address from the TISA report, is the teachers' remunerations. Now, from the private sector, you will notice that if we all now get to levels of having bachelor's degrees as the bare minimum, and I'm looking at myself with a bachelor's degree, but working in Sobozi's school, or teaching in Sobozi's school. And Mr. Nkutu here has also got a bachelor's degree, but he's teaching in a government school. He's on the government payroll. I am not on the government payroll. I just want to know from that now. Will you be able to pay, if we determine and say, like the council, if the council says the bare minimum for a teacher's salary is 1 million shillings, if government is going to give me 1 million shillings as a government teacher, will the private sector also give me 1 million shillings as a private teacher in a private school?
I'm afraid no. You see, the policy of government varies. There are various policies. I don't want to go into these details. Today I'm addressing myself to the national teacher policy. But you realize now it is, education is liberalized. For me to employ you in my school, I look at the qualifications. Are you qualified? And then we negotiate the salary. I don't want to go into those
Shall
semantics.
we not negotiate when we have the National Council? We have UNITE and we have the National Teacher Council. Will there be negotiations?
Precisely. The National Council is to do with the professionalism. Here we are talking of the economy. Because me in the private sector, I'm managed differently. Because I want the qualified human resource. And I will be able to pay as and when I can afford. But with the government, it has a set-up system on how it pays its workers. Even today, because you'll have the same school, same qualifications, paid differently.
Okay. I think now the discussion on remuneration here is a very big one, and you will have a problem explaining that. But before, I want to close with you, but let me come to Mr. Triateba here. Education, in this, rather, examinations is a death sentence. When people hear examinations, they fizzle, they get issues, they get goosebumps. What do you think needs to be done? Because when we talk about examinations, our exams are designed in a way of either failing us or trying to prove that Busowos is better than Semakula. Why?
I think the issue, Mr. Jagenda, is the issue of perception. If there is a police personnel along the road and you have a driving permit, the impact of the police personnel is of no consequence.
Even when they raise their hand?
If they raise the hand and you are confident you have what they deserve, and you have
the third party in your car.
Third party, they are there. They actually help you to clear the traffic jam. That's your worry. It's the same thing as examinations. Examinations are not the ones which issue you with a 0, like I was saying. No. Examinations only identify the talent, the competencies, and the proficiency level that you have achieved. It's like when you go, Mr. Jagenda, before the mirror, and you have not combed your hair. If the mirror says, go and comb, is the problem with the mirror? If you are unkempt, you go and comb and you are at peace with the mirror.
I don't break it.
So your neb is a mirror that mirrors what exactly has been going on between the teacher and the learner. I want to submit to us that competencies are not gained or lost through assessment. Competencies are gained or lost through the teaching and learning. And therefore, if we assess a child and we say this fellow cannot read, the problem is not with UNEB, which has exposed that this fellow cannot read. The only issue is that we have said these people are not competent in the trait of reading. And then what we want to assure this friend of mine, Godfrey, is that we are continually on the drawing board to carry out reforms, because we know nothing is static. Least of all, the curriculum that we have.
Okay.
There is a lot of dynamism globally, where we are now teaching toward the attainment of 21st century skills.
Okay.
Problem solving, critical thinking, and all that kind of thing. But then, as we do that, there's a need for curriculum reform. We follow it up with assessment reform, so that we bring out the competencies that we need. Initially, UNEB was having one type of assessment, which we call norm-referenced assessment, meaning that we are looking for the best of the best, and rank ordering. This is the first, this is the second, this is the third, this is the last. That was breeding competition. And that's why everybody was looking at examinations. UNEB releases results, everybody stops what they were doing, starts now analyzing results for a whole month, including the media. But then later we are saying, no, are we getting it right to go norm referencing, gauging the competence of the learners? We said no, let's go criterion referenced. Criterion reference means that what is it that you wanted to pass on the learner? Is it addition of 1 to 2 to 3, 2-digit numbers? Is it the solving of equations with fractions? Is it reading compositions? What is it that you want to pass on the learner? So we have moved now from norm reference assessment towards criterion reference assessment. Okay. And then he's worried of saying, should we now come only once to determine the fate of a learner after a long period of time and using one short exam? We're saying, no, it's not right, it's not fair. We are using now the teachers as well to be participants in the assessment of the learner. At the end of the day, we want this teacher to contribute 20% of their, what we call school-based or continuous assessment tests. So that those are put on the 80% that UNEB finally gives. And there we shall get a nuanced or true picture of what the learner knows. Therefore, we are on the path of continuous development of the learner's abilities, and I do believe we shall get there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turiatemba from the Uganda National Examinations Board. Mr. Nkutu, you had a question from your fellow panelist here, Mr. Busobozi, on CPDs. Can you just address us in 3 minutes, then we move out of studios?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Jaganda. What is going to happen is that the UNITE, which we have already talked about, will be developing standard CPDs in consultation with the teacher council. Because
Busobozi doesn't want you to hold a seminar somewhere and,
yes,
and you construe that
exactly.
to be a CPD.
He's right. He's right. Everybody wouldn't like that. What is happening, as I was saying, the teacher council, working closely with the UNITE, will be able to develop the standard CPDs. Then these standard CPDs will be given to approved service providers. It could be a university. It could be COPSTA if they have the capacity, so that they have the capacity to train them. It could be any other college, whether online or physically. So it is not just saying that you sit down, design your own program, and then say you have done this. There will be standardized CPDs or made in form of a course, which would be also to have time frame, and each of these CPD will have what you call credit units. That if you have undergone this training and you have successfully certified, I mean you have certified by the service provider, then that one will feed in the TIMIS. Immediately, the service provider, because has been given a certificate or a license to provide that service, immediately those who have attended, like you earlier on, we are talking about how much time have you put in, maybe they have given some assessment, and you are proved as somebody who has really benefited from that CPD, then the credit units will be put on STIMIS, and at the time of registering, the teacher council will be able just to go in the system and say, no, Nkutu was this time of the year, got 5 points. At this time of the year, got 10. So if you are able to accumulate the minimum credit points that are required, then you will be able to be registered. So it is not just business as usual, but it will be done by the professional body, UNITE and teacher council.
I want to thank you so much, Mr. Nkutu. Mr. Nkutu Chibedi is a Principal Education Officer in charge of a TTE, a project coordination from the Ministry of Education and Sports. Thank you so much for having allowed us your time this afternoon to be here. Thank you so much, Mr. James Turiatemba, the Manager for Examinations Management from UNEB. Yeah. Also, thank you so much for coming. And finally, my brother, Mr. Busobozi. Well, I also thank you so much, Mr. Busobozi is the Executive Director of the Coalition for Uganda Private Schools Association. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Mr.
And I think you need to engage with Mr. Nkutu here more on CPDs and of course the remuneration.
And I'm engaging the entire ministry.
Engage the entire ministry.
Yes, because we must streamline the private sector to be in line with what the policy says.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much, gentlemen, for having allowed to be with us here. And of course, we now say stage 4, our weekly Islamic program that is coming on very shortly after us here. But just to thank you and of course say that the National Teacher Policy is on and it is with you. It is here. For all of you teachers, those in schools and of course those intending to be, know that this is the way government is moving. The policy is here. You've got about 10 years if you're ready there to make sure that you make good to yourself by getting the bare minimum now, which is a bachelor's degree. But of course, we pray and wish that this policy really achieves its intended objectives. We thank the Ministry of Education and Sports and of course the support of UNESCO for making this every Friday and every Saturday, making it possible. Thank you. My name is Jagana Semakola Ziksoka, wishing a very blessed weekend for God and my country. Good evening.
The Teacher Management Information System, TMIS, is one of the innovations the Ministry of Education and Sports has rolled out to have all teachers register online. This is in line with the spirit of the National Teacher Policy to professionalize the teaching profession and the Ministry's effort to collate teacher data in a single database for better teacher management. Join us as we host officials of the Ministry of Education and Sports to discuss the Teacher Management Information System. The show is sponsored by the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, under the Norwegian Teacher Initiative and